Good morning, and welcome to World in 15, your trusted source for comprehensive coverage of today's most pressing events, delivered with accuracy, integrity, and insight.
Israel's military has announced it has taken control of the strategically important Philadelphia corridor, a buffer zone along the Gaza-Egypt border. This development means Israel now controls Gaza's entire land border. A spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, reported that around 20 tunnels used by Hamas to smuggle weapons into Gaza had been discovered within this zone. We have Shelby reporting on this.
Egyptian television sources have denied these claims, suggesting Israel is attempting to justify its military operations in Rafah, a southern Gaza city. This announcement comes amid heightened tensions with Egypt. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, an IDF spokesman, stated, "In recent days, IDF troops established operational control on the Philadelphia corridor on the border between Egypt and Rafah." He described the corridor as a crucial supply route for Hamas, through which the group regularly smuggled weapons into the Gaza Strip. Troops are reportedly investigating and neutralizing tunnels found in the area, although Hagari noted he could not confirm that all tunnels crossed into Egypt. The Philadelphia corridor is a narrow buffer zone, approximately 100 meters, 330 feet, wide in some parts, running along the Gaza side of the 13 kilometers, 8-mile border with Egypt. Gaza's only other land border is with Israel. While Egypt has previously stated it had destroyed cross-border tunnels to prevent weapons smuggling, a high-level Egyptian source, quoted by Al Qahira News, accused Israel of using these allegations to justify its ongoing operations in Rafah and prolong the conflict for political purposes. Israel maintains that capturing Rafah is essential for achieving victory in the war triggered by Hamas's unprecedented attack on October 7, which resulted in about 1,200 deaths and 252 hostages. Since the conflict began, at least 36,170 people have been killed across Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Tensions between Egypt and Israel have been escalating since Israeli forces took control of the Gazan side of the Rafah crossing 3 weeks ago as part of their offensive against Hamas. An Egyptian soldier was killed earlier this week in an incident involving Egyptian and Israeli troops near Rafah. Egypt, a strong supporter of the Palestinians, has condemned Israel's military campaign in Gaza and the resulting civilian casualties. Despite maintaining a blockade on its border with Gaza since Hamas came to power in 2006, Egypt has kept communication channels open with Hamas and has been mediating indirect talks between Israel and Hamas to reach a ceasefire and secure the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Back to you, John.
Thanks for that update.
A senior Israeli official has indicated that the war against Hamas in Gaza is expected to continue for at least the remainder of this year. Sachi Hanegbi, the Prime Minister's national security advisor, told Israel's Kan public radio, "The fighting in Gaza will continue for at least another 7 months." We have Anthony reporting on this.
Hanegbi also stated that Israel's military has taken control of 75% of the buffer zone along the Gaza-Egypt border, known as the Philadelphia corridor, as it continues its assault on the southern city of Rafah. Residents of Rafah have reported additional Israeli airstrikes and tank raids in central and western areas. A senior World Health Organization (WHO) official has warned that Rafah's last hospital is barely functional and a full incursion by Israeli troops could lead to its closure and result in a substantial number of deaths. The IDF has stated that its operations in Rafah are very targeted against the remaining Hamas battalions. Despite the ongoing conflict, the U.S. government has stated it does not believe a major ground operation is underway, which would alter its policy on military aid to Israel. The conflict began on October 7 with a Hamas attack on Israel, resulting in about 1,200 deaths and 252 hostages taken. According to the Hamas-run health ministry, at least 36,170 people have been killed across Gaza since the conflict started. Hanegbi, a close confidant of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, emphasized that the conflict could last another 7 months to ensure the destruction of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad's capabilities. This statement has raised concerns both within and outside Israel. International pressure is mounting on Israeli leaders to develop a comprehensive strategy to end the fighting and present a post-war vision for Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has stressed the importance of a post-war plan to ensure Hamas's lasting defeat. Inside Gaza, the IDF claims control over 75% of the Philadelphia corridor, aiming to prevent weapon smuggling with cooperation from Egypt, which has denied ongoing smuggling activities. Residents have reported that Israeli troops have seized approximately 9 kilometers of the corridor, including the Rafah border crossing, and have pushed into built-up areas of Rafah. The IDF announced that 3 Israeli soldiers were killed in combat in Rafah on Tuesday. Sam Rose of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, reported that many residents are leaving Rafah due to the escalating conflict. The WHO has expressed concerns that the ongoing bombardment and military actions are making it increasingly difficult for patients and health teams to reach the remaining functional hospital in Rafah. Gaza's health ministry has reported that multiple medical facilities in Rafah have been forced out of service due to the conflict, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The IDF has stated that its airstrike on a camp in Tal al-Sultan targeted senior Hamas officials, with investigations ongoing into whether stored weapons caused a secondary explosion. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, has ordered Israel to immediately halt its military offensive in the Rafah governorate to prevent conditions that could lead to the physical destruction of the Palestinian population in Gaza. Back to you, Bella.
Thanks for that update.
3 police officers were injured during a demonstration organized by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign and other groups in Westminster. The Metropolitan Police reported that 1 officer sustained a serious facial injury after being hit by a bottle thrown from the crowd. The suspect responsible for the injury has not yet been identified, and an investigation is ongoing. We have Jensen reporting on this.
During the protest, which began in Whitehall at 18:00 BST and was scheduled to end 2 hours later, police made 40 arrests related to assaults on emergency workers, obstruction of the highway, and breaches of the Public Order Act. Despite the protest attracting between 8,000 and 10,000 participants, the vast majority of protesters left peacefully at the scheduled end time. However, approximately 500 individuals continued to protest beyond the designated end time. Police reported that some protesters resisted arrest, which required officers to use force to remove them from the crowd. A breakaway march then proceeded to Bridge Street outside Westminster Station, prompting police to establish cordons. Shortly before 22:00, officers moved into the crowd to arrest those suspected of leading the breakaway protest. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign stated that the emergency march was organized to reiterate calls for a ceasefire in Gaza following an Israeli airstrike and resulting fire that killed at least 45 Palestinians. Back to you, John.
Thanks for that update.
A temporary pier built by the U.S. military to facilitate aid delivery to Gaza has been damaged by heavy seas and will require at least a week for repairs, according to U.S. officials. The floating pier, connected to Gaza's shoreline by a temporary causeway, suffered damage when the causeway portion broke off due to rough weather conditions. We have Alana reporting on this.
The pier, announced by U.S. officials in March, consists of a large floating dock made of steel segments and a 2-lane, 1,800 feet, 548 meters causeway. The causeway comprises interconnected 40 feet, 12 meters, steel pieces linked together and attached to the shore. Heavy seas caused a portion of the causeway to detach, necessitating its removal for repairs at the Israeli port of Ashdod before it can be reattached and made operational again. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh confirmed that the causeway would be removed with the assistance of the Israeli Navy over the next 2 days. The repairs are expected to take more than a week. Singh noted that weather conditions had not been favorable for the pier's deployment, but expressed confidence that it would be operational again soon, acknowledging that such weather-related challenges were anticipated. Despite the setbacks, the pier has been instrumental in delivering humanitarian aid. The U.S. military confirmed that the first shipments of aid were delivered via the pier on May 17. Since then, the UN World Food Programme, WFP, reported transporting approximately 900 metric tons of aid through the pier. However, in a recent incident, 4 vessels supporting the pier became unmoored, with 2 of them beaching. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains dire, with only a fraction of the needed aid reaching the population. The White House emphasized that the pier was intended to complement, not replace, aid delivered through land crossings. Despite these efforts, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated his commitment to achieving total victory in Rafah, the last urban stronghold of Hamas in southern Gaza. Israel's military campaign in Gaza commenced following an attack by Hamas on October 7, which resulted in the deaths of about 1,200 people and the abduction of 252 others. Since the beginning of the conflict, over 36,000 Palestinians have been killed, according to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry. Back to you, Bella.
Thanks for that update.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the war against Hamas despite international condemnation of an airstrike in Rafah that killed scores of Palestinians on Sunday. The strike, which resulted in at least 45 deaths and hundreds of severe injuries according to the Hamas-run health ministry, has been described by Netanyahu as a tragic mishap. We have Jordan reporting on this.
Speaking in the Israeli parliament, Netanyahu emphasized the necessity of continuing the military campaign until all goals are achieved. He acknowledged the tragic nature of the strike but insisted that Israel is taking every precaution to protect civilians. He reiterated that the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, are making their best efforts to avoid harming uninvolved individuals. The UN Security Council is set to hold an emergency meeting to discuss the Rafah strike. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the strike, stating that there is no safe place in Gaza and calling for an end to the conflict. EU officials have urged Israel to comply with a recent International Court of Justice, ICJ, ruling to halt strikes on Rafah. The UN's human rights chief, Volker Turk, criticized the attack for showing no apparent change in Israel's methods of warfare, which have led to numerous civilian deaths. The IDF has launched an investigation into the incident, with officials admitting that something went tragically wrong despite their efforts to avoid civilian casualties. Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, and other humanitarian organizations have condemned the strike, highlighting the severe impact on civilians in a supposed safe zone. While the U.S. recognized Israel's right to defend itself and noted that the strike targeted 2 senior Hamas commanders, it also stressed the importance of taking precautions to protect civilians. The White House described the images from the strike as heartbreaking, but defended Israel's actions against Hamas. Israel's military campaign in Gaza began after a Hamas attack on October 7, which resulted in the deaths of about 1,200 people and the abduction of 252 others to Gaza. Since then, more than 36,000 Palestinians have been killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Despite the high civilian toll, Netanyahu remains committed to achieving what he describes as total victory in Rafah. Back to you, John.
Thanks for that update.
Customers with funds locked up in Gemini's defunct crypto lending program are finally starting to get their money back. Gemini, owned by tech billionaire twins Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, announced on Wednesday that it will return $2.18 billion of digital assets to users of its Earn program, which had paused withdrawals in November 2022. We have Lee reporting on this.
In an email to customers, Gemini stated, "Today, we are pleased to let you know that initial Earn distributions, approximately 97% of the digital assets owed to you by Genesis as of the suspension date, November 16, 2022, are now available in your Gemini account. This announcement follows a settlement with Genesis and other creditors in the Genesis bankruptcy case, ensuring all Earn users receive 100% of their digital assets back in kind." The email elaborated, "This means that if you lent 1 Bitcoin in the Earn program, you will receive 1 Bitcoin back. And it means that you will receive any and all increase in the value of your assets since you lent them into the Earn program. The $2.18 billion fund distribution marks a 232% recovery for users since Gemini froze withdrawals for its Earn program customers 18 months ago. First launched in 2021, the Earn program allowed customers to earn high yields on their coins by storing them in Gemini's scheme. Gemini lent customers crypto to institutional borrowers through its lending partner, Genesis Global Capital. In November 2022, Genesis Global Capital paused new loan originations and redemptions, which led Gemini to halt withdrawals from its Earn program. Genesis later filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in January in Manhattan Federal Court. Recently, New York Attorney General Letitia James announced a $2 billion settlement with Genesis to repay defrauded investors, further facilitating the return of funds to Gemini's users. Back to you, Bella.
Thanks for that update.
Shares of Salesforce plunged over 14% following the announcement of its first quarter revenue of $9.13 billion, which fell short of the $9.17 billion consensus estimate from LSEG, although adjusted earnings of $2.44 per share surpassed the consensus estimate of $2.38. The company's guidance for the current quarter was lower than expected on both top and bottom lines. We have Patrick reporting on this.
The software company's stock plummeted 30% after the announcement that CEO Rob Enslin will resign, effective June 1. He will also step down from the board of directors. Daniel Dines, the former CEO and current Chief Innovation Officer, will resume his role as CEO. HP Incorporated saw a 3% increase in its share price. The company reported adjusted earnings of 82 cents per share on revenue of $12.8 billion for its fiscal second quarter, exceeding analysts' estimates of 81 cents per share and $12.6 billion in revenue, according to LSEG. The company's shares rose 1% after reporting better than expected fiscal first quarter earnings. Pure Storage posted adjusted earnings of 32 cents per share on revenue of $693.5 million, beating analysts' forecasts of 21 cents per share on $681 million in revenue. Shares of Okta gained nearly 2% following strong first quarter results that exceeded analysts' expectations. Additionally, Okta's second quarter revenue guidance range of $631 million to $633 million surpassed the consensus estimate of $616 million, according to LSEG data. The fashion group, which includes Versace and Jimmy Choo, saw a 3% decline in its share price after missing analysts' expectations for its fiscal fourth quarter results. Capri reported adjusted earnings of 42 cents per share, below the 65 cents estimated by analysts, with revenue of $1.22 billion falling short of the forecasted $1.30 billion. Management attributed the shortfall to weakening demand for luxury goods and a slowdown in Asia. The artificial intelligence software company's shares climbed over 8% after reporting quarterly results that exceeded expectations. C3 AI reported a loss of 11 cents per share on revenue of $86.6 million, better than the consensus estimates of a 30-cent loss on $84.4 million in revenue. Full-year revenue forecasts also surpassed expectations. Shares of the clothing retailer fell nearly 6% following first quarter revenue that missed estimates and the issuance of weak forward guidance. American Eagle Outfitters reported $1.14 billion in revenue, slightly below the $1.15 billion estimate, according to LSEG data. Despite earnings beating estimates, full-year revenue guidance was projected in a range of 2% to 4%, lower than the forecasted 3.4%. Agilent Technologies tumbled 14% after lowering its full-year earnings and revenue guidance. The company revised its earnings guidance to $5.15 to $5.25 per share from the previous $5.44 to $5.55, and its revenue guidance to $6.42 billion to $6.50 billion from the prior $6.71 billion to $6.81 billion. Although fiscal second quarter earnings topped estimates, revenue narrowly missed the consensus estimate. Shares of Nutanix fell 14% following the issuance of a fiscal fourth quarter revenue forecast of $530 million to $540 million, missing analysts' estimates of $546 million. Full-year revenue guidance was also adjusted to $2.13 billion to $2.14 billion, compared to prior forecasts of $2.12 billion to $2.15 billion and consensus estimates of $2.14 billion, according to FactSet. Back to you, John.
Thanks for that update. Thanks for tuning in to World in 15 for your daily dose of news and updates. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on breaking stories and insightful analysis.